From the Weston A. Price Foundation, welcome to the Wise Traditions podcast for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. We are your source for scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom to help you achieve optimal health. And now here is our host and producer, Hilda Labrada Gore.
Hey, Hilda here. Just last month, the federal administration announced that the COVID public health emergency would end on May 11th, 2023. And on that same date, COVID-19 vaccine requirements for federal employees, federal contractors, and international air travelers would no longer be required. Great! But where does that leave us in terms of boosters, COVID-19 injections on the recommended vaccination schedule for children, and more? What might the future hold? This is episode 423, and our guest today is Dr. Larry Palevsky, a pediatrician focused on a holistic approach to children's health. We spoke with him a few months ago before the recent announcement, but this conversation still offers numerous insights as Larry gives us a kind of COVID shot State of the Union. He gives us the inside scoop on his understanding of the shot and its consequences. He covers strategies for detoxing from it. He covers strategy for detoxing from the shot if you've gotten it yourself or had your children take it. He also offers his take on whether or not people are waking up to the reality of these problematic injections. And he also reveals who is likely pulling the strings on the current healthcare system and what we might expect down the line. Ultimately, Larry offers ideas for how to fight back against future potential mandates and protect our health in the process. Before we dive into the conversation, I want to invite you to our Wise Traditions Conference in Kansas City, Missouri this October, the 20th to the 22nd. It is the conference that nourishes in every way. It will feature some of our favorite speakers like Sally Fallon-Morell, Tom Cowan, and Dr. Natasha Campbell-McBride, along with some new speakers like author Naomi Wolf, Alex Zeck, William Trebbing, the author of Goodbye Germ Theory, Mary Reddick, Ken Rolla, and Jim Stevenson. Sign up today and find out more at wisetraditions.org. And get your tickets while the early bird pricing is still in effect. And a shout out to Earth Runners. Free your feet, rewild your soul. Earth Runners wants to restore our relationship with nature and to help us rediscover our ancestral roots via minimalist earthing sandals. It's obvious that we need to incorporate more simple nature-based lifestyle practices and outsource less of our life to modern technology. Our ancestors were virtually always grounded. Honestly, it's only since the advent of modern insulating soles that we have lost this connection to the earth. Earth Runner's minimalist sandals feature a copper earthing plug and conductive laces to keep us grounded to the earth for a more barefoot-like experience. So free your feet, rewild your soul with Earth Runners sandals. Go to earthrunners.com and use the code WISE23 for 10% off at checkout. That's earthrunners.com and the code WISE23. This is Hilda Labrada Gore, and you're listening to Wise Traditions. Welcome to Wise Traditions, Larry.
Oh, it's great to be here again, Hilda. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too. And we missed each other at the conference, but there are other people that didn't make it there either. And so I thought it would be good to dive in with you about what's happening now on the COVID shot front. I'm especially concerned right now because even though in some ways I see COVID as something that should be in the rearview mirror, recently the CDC is recommending for the children's vaccination schedule to include the COVID shot. What do you make of that, Larry?
First of all, for those of you who are listening, the COVID shot has not been approved. It's not licensed. It's only authorized. It's still part of the emergency use authorization. So it has never gone through the proper licensing procedures that are necessary that are similar to the other ways in which childhood vaccines have been placed on the schedule. Number two, and I'm going to say something bold, Hilda, because you know that I'm likely to do things like that when I give my answers. And it's not something that I haven't said before, but I'm going to crystallize it right now. The COVID illness, which definitely there was a specific presentation of symptoms for people who got sick that had nothing to do with a nasal swab result. There were people who got very specific symptoms that were different than what we had seen in the past, that were not flu-like symptoms, but we're very specific to what I would call, and what I have called for over 3 years, a poisoning. This illness is not caused by a virus. This illness is not an infectious illness. This illness is not an infection. Therefore, there is no need for a vaccine. And one has to question, and I will say, Hilda, that I am 99.99% certain that this is not a viral illness. And so I am that certain that there's no need for a vaccine. So one has to question, I don't know, Hilda, if this is not an infection, what is this shot? What is this shot for? And for those who are having trouble going down the rabbit hole, because many of us, Hilda, have gone down the rabbit hole for more than just 3 years. We've gone down the rabbit hole for several decades, at least I have, because of my research. One has to wonder if there's a sinister agenda that is related to this shot, because we are seeing such unprecedented adverse effects in all strata of the population, young, middle-aged, and old. We are seeing tremendous numbers of deaths, strokes, heart attacks, neurological problems, autoimmune conditions, Bell's palsy, blood clots, infertility, miscarriages, fetal malformations, babies being born with birth defects, menstrual cycle problems. And what's most interesting is that so many doctors are witnessing it. So many doctors, Hilda, who never would have considered a shot being a problem in the schedule, who are now waking up to the problems that they are seeing in their practices from this shot, and a 100% widespread censorship of all of this information.
So given all that you've said, and there's a lot to digest here, at the very outset here, we need to ask, going back to my original question, why the CDC would recommend including this COVID shot for children when so many people, young and old, as you've mentioned, have had these adverse effects. And so that's my question to you, actually. Why would they recommend this given where we're at today, Larry?
So, Hilda, for decades, there have been major concerns about childhood and adult vaccinations. There have been amazing concerns about safety, about proper scientific method being used. There have been concerns about infiltration of these regulatory boards with people who stand to gain tremendous amounts of money and notoriety if they approve these shots. There's been decades of parents and even young adults who aren't parents complaining of adverse effects. And there have been decades of silence, decades of ignoring, decades of gaslighting, where people are told over and over and over again, vaccines are safe, that vaccines are properly studied, and vaccine injury is very rare. And yet, on the ground, Hilda, there are millions and millions of experiential stories of people who have known otherwise. And all that happens is silence on the part of the authority. And so the CDC is unstoppable because they've had decades worth of unstoppable policy. They've had the propaganda, they've had the media, they've had the medical institutions, they've had the governmental institutions, they've had major Hollywood supporters, they've had advertisers, they've had infiltration into every major aspect of society that pushes the same statements. Vaccines are safe. Vaccines are effective. Vaccine injury is rare. And what they have done is anyone who questions it, they have said, you need to be prosecuted, you need to be fired, you need to be penalized, you need to be ostracized. And so one has to question, scratch your head and say, wait a second, whatever happened to dialogue, debate, discussion? Whatever happened to differences of opinion? It's not there anymore. And so when the CDC makes recommendations, the state governments have almost unanimously said, well, if the CDC recommends it, it must be good. They must know what they're talking about. So we don't have to worry about whether or not there's a problem. We're just going to do it.
Yes, that's how it comes across. And that's what's happening, even though if you look at the statistics of how many children were affected by this sickness, regardless of its source, the percentage was so low of those who got sick and those who died that it wouldn't seem to warrant including this shot in the schedule. And yet there it is. And most people, I would say the vast majority of the population is doing the same as the state's regulatory decision makers. They're just rolling over and saying, if they recommend it, it must be okay. Isn't that the case?
Correct. And it's always been the case. And again, because the CDC has this track record of idol worship, because if the CDC says it, we do it, there's very little in the part of the state governments or the state departments of health or whomever is making the decree in the states based on the CDC recommendations to actually challenge it or say no. I mean, there are a couple of states in the country, in the United States, that are saying that we're not going to mandate this shot no matter what. But those are few and far between. Again, because the state bodies are so strong-armed by those behind the push to make this shot part of the schedule that they have no recourse other than to mandate it. And as you know, exemption opportunities have been squeezed around the country and around the world, which makes you wonder, why are they treating every single person as the same? Why are they not looking at specific health issues or specific conditions or specific genetic problems as possible exceptions? Why are they treating everybody the same? Why is it that if you got the shot and you had an adverse effect, they're telling you, no, it wasn't from the shot, get another one? So we have had gaslighting going on for decades. And what we're seeing now, Hilda, is the mass awakening to the gaslighting that people were really not aware of. And more, you see people who never questioned the vaccine schedule starting to say, well, hold on a second. If this COVID shot is bringing so many of the problems that I listed and then some, what about the rest of the childhood vaccine schedule? What about the rest of the adult vaccine schedule? And so people are waking up to the idea that they were complicit and they are now responsible for making different choices and to educating themselves instead of bowing down to the papal ring that says, well, if they say it, therefore it is. And that's what the race is. The race is between those who are continuing to love the idol worship with those who are saying, wait a second, we realize that we may have been complicit in allowing you to pull the wool over our eyes about something that is not only not safe, but it's deadly. And it has the potential to reduce the population through fetal death, through infertility, through major autoimmune diseases, through major neurological problems, through cancer, through strokes, through blood clots, through major incapacitation. And you have regular mainstream doctors who will say to you, I've never seen this before. We've never seen this before after any shot. Or they never noticed it before, even though it was there. But now it's at such an amplified level. And because the media is controlling the dialogue, and because governmental institutions are controlling the media, and because there are other forces controlling governmental institutions, we're having to bring out this information sort of underground. And it makes you wonder, why are people who are actually questioning, discussing, reporting their observations, reporting their concerns, being brought up on charges brought up on threatening their licenses, bankrupting them by taking them to court to have to defend themselves. Why would all of that have to happen if you're just simply asking a question, telling about your experiences, offering your observations, and trying to engage in a scientific dialogue? What is that about? That's tyranny.
Yes.
I mean, that's clear out and out tyranny. That's not freedom.
No, but I love what you're saying. From the start of this conversation, Larry, you have been bringing up questions that I think have come to the fore because of COVID. A friend of mine said the silver lining of the times and even the insistence on the shot and mandatory shots being required in different levels is that people are waking up, that they're realizing, oh, not only is this not good for me, but I saw my cousin died suddenly and all these things. So there is kind of an upwising of the crowd, I think is what Sally or Tom Naughton calls it, an upwising of the crowd. So I love this. It's a grassroots movement of asking questions and taking ownership of our own health autonomy. But going back to the point you were making about the media, I saw that the New York Post recently published an article on COVID, expert myths debunked. It was conceding essentially that some of the things we were saying all along, masks don't work, were true. Now, if the media is controlled, as you were saying, why would they start kind of giving some ground to those who are protesting or asking questions?
Oh, I mean, this is typical war propaganda policies. You know, you stand up strong and then you backpedal and you make people believe that they're actually listening to you. They're actually sympathetic. I mean, there are some media posts that are willing to go out on the limb and post the truth. No pun intended, New York Post. But yeah, I mean, this is a way, to me, it's just a seduction. It's just a way to lure you in. Oh, you know, please forgive us. We sort of apologize, but we really didn't know better and we should have known. And we're now realizing, and give us amnesty and all this. Please be gentle with us. And as far as I know, Hilda, the people who are waking up are pretty fierce. And this amnesty nonsense and this please be gentle with us is nonsense. And they're looking to gain the affection of those who have been wronged. And yes, now we understand how horrible it was. And maybe we should have said something sooner and we didn't know any better. Yeah. Meanwhile, there were people screaming at the tops of their lungs on tops of mountains, begging for people to listen. And they were censored. They were pushed aside. They were ostracized. They were threatened. I'm sorry, but you don't get a pass. You don't get a pass. You are complicit because you were strong-armed into being complicit and you were threatened into being complicit and you went along with it. And many people suffered because you didn't sound the alarm.
Coming up, Larry discusses a number of approaches for detoxing from the shot, and he offers practical ideas to build a solid foundation for health.
You're listening to the Wise Traditions podcast from the Weston A. Price Foundation. We pause now to recognize our sponsors.
Paleo Valley. Their turmeric complex is rooted in the fact that turmeric itself is one of the most potent natural ways to encourage a healthy inflammation response in the body. It inhibits the inflammatory factor, basically. There are a lot of ailments rooted in or exacerbated by inflammation. And because of that, there are a lot of ways that turmeric can help. Whether it's an issue with joint health or joint discomfort, cellular health, poor blood flow, and neurodegenerative diseases, these things are all made worse by inflammation. Paleo Valley, in their complex, has combined turmeric with coconut oil and black pepper, which has been shown to help turmeric absorption by 2,000%. They have also included in their complex organic ginger, rosemary, and cloves, which have additional benefits like brain support, healthy inflammation response, immune support, and healthy digestion and blood sugar level regulation. Go to paleovalley.com to find out more about this and their many other products, and use the code WISE at checkout for 15% off your purchase. That's paleovalley.com and the code word WISE. And Brain Nourish is a revolutionary new product from the guys over at Optimal Carnivore. They have combined grass-fed beef brain and lion's mane mushrooms in a groundbreaking formula. It is the ultimate whole food nootropic to build a better brain. These 2 ancestral superfoods have been used for centuries to improve brain function and overall mental well-being for the first time together in convenient capsules. And they are guaranteed to have your brain firing on all cylinders for supreme focus, elevated mood, improved memory, greater clarity, and enhanced creativity. Each serving has 1,500 milligrams of organic lion's mane and 1,500 milligrams of beef brain. So check out Brain Nourish at amazon.com/optimalcarnivore and use the code WESTON10 to receive 10% off all products. That's amazon.com/optimalcarnivore and the code WESTON10. This is Hilda Labrada Gore, and you're listening to Wise Traditions. Yes, and the thing is, as you're pointing out, it wasn't just, let's say, some anti-tyranny freedom fighters out there saying, you will not inject me with something. It was doctors. And now there are cardiologists and OBGYN and people seeing fallout from the shots themselves, but they're nervous about speaking out about what they're observing because they don't want to be pilloried as others have been or pushed to the brink. As you were saying, some have lost their jobs or they've lost their reputations. And so they've kind of seen what's happened and they're keeping it on the down low. And yet the truth cannot be suppressed, in my opinion. And what I wanted to ask you next actually is, what myth is being busted, or do you see that is like being kind of blown out of the water right now with the fallout from the shots or as COVID fades into the rearview mirror?
Well, there are studies coming out by reputable physicians and scientists, which are, you can't deny the results. We're seeing miscarriages. We're seeing infertility. We're seeing birth defects. We're seeing neurological problems in newborns. I mean, there are nurses and doctors who are finally coming out and explaining the numbers of babies dying in the newborn nursery and in the delivery room have increased exponentially. And they're able to correlate it with the COVID injection that one or both parents have gotten. And so these myths that nothing bad is going on, and more people are recognizing that 30-year-olds, 22-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 5-year-olds are having heart attacks, strokes, sudden collapse that no one has seen before. And, you know, if you go back to every movement that struggled to get its recognition, one of the ways that the movement gained recognition is because we were able to show everyone on the planet that you knew someone who died from the shot. You knew someone who was whatever the movement was. You know someone who's a woman, women's movement. You know someone who's Black, civil rights movement. You know someone who's gay, gay rights movement. And now everyone is saying, you know someone who died from the shot. You know someone who suffered at the hands of the shot. You have a 30-year-old nephew who collapsed suddenly. And so it's becoming, you know, the expression NIMBY, not in my backyard.
Oh, yes, not in my backyard.
It's becoming my backyard. And so people are actually realizing that it's not some nebulous stuff that's happening out there, that it's actually something real happening in their own backyard. In my experience, people don't learn until it's their experience. And they don't learn until it's close to them. So it's the experience of someone that's close to them. And in my practice, Hilda, when I teach parents about children and their learning, I constantly have to repeat, children don't learn by what you tell them. They learn by what they experience. And they learn by imitating you. And this is the same thing. You don't learn that people are dying just because the news or some news piece says it. You learn people are dying because you start to see it happening around you. And then the movement becomes real. It's always a race.
Yes.
We're at a race. Which is going to be more real.
And so my question is, as enough people start to realize, oh, the shot is worse than the sickness that we originally were fighting, and when they start to resist, for example, the push for boosters and whatnot, will that help turn the tide, do you think? Isn't that exactly where it starts with each individual saying, I'm not going to do this?
Well, I think we'll see. We'll see if the states start to mandate the shot for school. And if they do, we'll see what the fallout is. Will parents rebel by flooding the state capitol? Will they rebel by taking their kids out of school? Will they scurry around to find an exemption? Or will they give the shot? And any which way we see it, there will be a consequence. I've been on record since October of 2020 that this is a kill shot. This is a murder weapon. And I'm not changed my mind once. This was 2-3 months before the shot was brought into the public in January of 2021. And I gave all the reasons that I thought this shot was potentially lethal and everything that I talked about. And the thing is that you just watch and wait to see when the information will become real for those who are either blinded or unaware or unwilling to know the truth. And many of us have said from very early on, this will be one of the greatest sacrifices of children that we have ever seen if parents continue to go through with this. So we'll see what happens with the state mandates. And somebody asked me the other day, Dr. Larry, do you think the states are going to mandate the shot? And very tongue-in-cheek, I said, I hope so. And the reason I said I hope so was not because I want to see kids get hurt, but because you need to have some action for people to have a reaction. And if they're just sitting back, again, it's not in my backyard. I don't have to do anything. But once you start to see the squeeze, once you start to see the states are mandating it, you start to see whether the population says, no, wait a second, there's too much dangerous stuff happening with this shot. I'm not going to do it. But you then may also see, oh, but I want my kid to fit in, or, oh, but I want my kid to be able to go to the party, and, oh, but I want my kid to go to school. I'm like, well, we can't promise that your kid will be functional after your kid goes to the party or to school. But that's the kind of decision tree that we need to see. Because again, people don't learn unless they have the experience. And they can't say, well, nobody told me, because it's happening right in front of them.
My question to you, Larry, is in your practice, have you seen fallout from the shot for children?
The families in my practice, let's say I have 1,000 families in my practice. 999 families did not give the kid their shot.
Oh.
Okay? If I do see a kid who got the shot, it's because they're coming to me because of a dangerous side effect. And they're asking if I could help them resolve the dangerous side effects. I've seen a girl with an autoimmune condition. This was, again, after 2 shots and a booster. I've seen a baby where the mother got the 2 Pfizer shots within the first month of pregnancy, and the baby is severely neurologically impaired. All right. And again, these are the things that come to me. I've seen the parents who got the shot who were injured. For the most part, I'm protected from the kids getting the shot because the parents in my practice are so awake, not woke, awake.
Little distinction. What are your thoughts, Larry, about recovering from the COVID shot? So this young girl who has this autoimmune condition, or a 5-year-old with myocarditis, what direction can you point these families in to help them recover, as far as you know?
Okay. There are a lot of people who are saying, I could recover your kid from the damages of the COVID shot. And the thing is that that's actually an individual case basis. For someone to say, I can recover your kid, or I can recover you from the side effects of the COVID shot, is a little bold in my view, because we're still figuring out what is even in these shots. So you have a lot of people who say, oh, well, we can dissolve the spike protein. Okay, well, then you have others who will say, wait a second, they've never found the spike protein. There is no such thing as a spike protein. There is a poison, and it has these properties, but there's no isolation of the spike protein. And then you have other people who are saying, wait a second, we don't know the ingredients in this shot. We have no idea what's in the shot. So how do we know what's dormant? How do we know what's hanging out? How do we know what's never going to come out? How do we know? So, you have people using the typical supplements that were used during the COVID illness, the quercetin, the zinc, the copper, the glutathione, the ozone, the vitamin C, the vitamin DK, the melatonin, the ozone therapies, the hyperbaric oxygen therapies, the baths. You have all of that. And you have people who are still believing in the ivermectin and the hydroxychloroquine and the antibiotics and the steroids. You have that. And then you have people who are using the aspirin to help with the clots and the nattokinase to help with the clots and dissolve the spike protein. And again, it's working on individual basis. Then you have people who go to classical trained homeopaths who are helping people, and people who are going to Chinese medicine practitioners and acupuncturists, and people going to naturopaths, people who are desperate. But again, it needs to be an individualized therapy. And because we don't know the ingredients, those practitioners who can treat the whole person rather than, we're going to get rid of the spike protein, probably have a little bit more success. Oh, I forgot the infrared saunas. There's so many, the ionic foot baths. There are just so many. I know there are more, but people could write in and say, Dr. Larry forgot this one. Molecular hydrogen, chlorine dioxide. Oh yeah, here it comes. I'm getting the flood of all these. Dr. Larry, you forgot this. You forgot this. I mean, Dr. Tenpenny's using the ECP beds, which are helping people. This is going to be a massive recovery and a massive cleanup. And we don't know yet, especially because there is also an electromagnetic pulsing contribution. The materials that are in the body are nanoparticles, and they are nanometals, and they are magnetic, and they are responding to direct energy weapons, DEWs, or electromagnetic pulsing, or 5G, which are direct energy weapons. And so the relationship between getting better and reducing your exposure to EMFs is an important one. How do you clean out somebody and recover somebody if they're sitting in Wi-Fi, they have a cell tower above their heads, and they have a 5G tower not too far from them, and they're constantly on their phone and on their laptop and on their iPad, and this is the world we live in. So there's a lot that needs to be done to help recover people. And it's multifactorial, it's multi-practitioner, it's multi-modality, and it's a lot of luck because we don't exactly know the properties of the pieces that are in this injection that are going to act now, that are come out later, that are come out even later. We don't know.
Right. And that is not the most hopeful response, but it is very honest, which I appreciate. One thing that occurs to me is the list of things you were bringing up. A lot of them have a detoxification process to them. So the idea would be, I would imagine, just like you said, if these shots are poisoning us, to find a way to get the poison out. But that will depend on the individual, on where they are located, and many factors, as you said. Happily, wherever people live, they can eat the Wise Traditions way. They can get sunshine. They can get outdoors. They can sweat. They can do things that will naturally help their bodies detox from whatever poisons they may be exposed to. It's not just the people who got the shot who are getting things in their body that our ancestors didn't face, right?
So you just actually gave me an aha moment here, Hilda, because after all the things I mentioned, I forgot to mention the things that I start with when I work with kids to try to detox them. Try to reduce the toxins you're putting into the body. That has to come first before you start bombarding the body with all these techniques and interventions and supplements and pharmaceuticals. And the first thing is to reduce the inflammatory input through diet and environmental exposure, and through lifestyle and through relationship. So you're right. Diet, exercise are both most important before you start throwing all of these modalities into the mix.
Absolutely. Wow. Well, this has been very mind-blowing from the start. As soon as we got out of the gate, Larry, when you were talking about how this shot has actually only been authorized and not really approved. So this is a starting point for folks to ask questions. I think you brought up so much for us to consider, but we're going to have to wrap it up now. And I'd like to end with a question I'd like to pose at the end. If the listener could do one thing to improve their health, what would you recommend that they do?
Oh, wow. One thing, the last thing? Well, I'm a big proponent of healthy diet and healthy eating. I'm a big proponent of seasonal eating. And I'm a big proponent of organic, non-glyphosate, grass-fed, pasture-raised, humanely raised, humanely taken care of animal products, and a conscious eating where we're not eating something that comes from 5,000 miles away. We're supporting local farms. We're eating local food. We're eating warm foods when it's cold out. We're eating cooler foods when it's warm out. We're adapting our diets as the seasons go along with our lifestyles and our amount of activity so that we live closer to nature than we just do the same thing every day, regardless of the season and regardless of the temperature outside.
Wow. This is fantastic. This is how we choose to live. This is one way to take our health into our own hands. Thank you for empowering us with this conversation, Larry. It's been wonderful.
Oh, it's great, Hilda. I love Wise Traditions. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks.
Our guest today was Larry Palevsky. You can visit his website, drpalevsky.com, and listen to his podcast, Critically Thinking with Dr. T and Dr. P. And I'm Hilda Labrador, the host and producer of this show for the Weston A. Price Foundation. You can find me at holistichilda.com. And for the transcript for this podcast episode, visit our website, westonaprice.org, and click on the podcast page. And now for a recent review from Apple Podcasts. Wisdom Gatherer had this to say: "Thank you for providing well-rounded and well-researched knowledge as well as information. I appreciate being empowered to think for myself rather than regurgitating what someone else tells me. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Wisdom Gatherer, for this review and all the stars. You too can leave us a review. Go to Apple Podcasts, click on ratings and reviews, leave us as many stars as you like, and tell the world why the show is worth listening to. And thank you in advance. And thank you for listening. Stay well, my friend, and remember to keep your feet on the ground and your face to the sun."
On behalf of the Weston A. Price Foundation, thanks for listening. We have many free resources to support you on your health journey. Visit westonaprice.org to find podcasts, articles, videos, and more. You can also find a local chapter near you for help in finding sources of great food. We invite you to support the Foundation's mission of education, research, and activism by becoming a member. Thanks again, and take care. Wise Traditions is a project of the Weston A. Price Foundation for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. The content on this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended to substitute for the advice provided by your doctor or other healthcare professional. It is not intended to be, nor does it constitute healthcare or medical advice.